Hey everyone, and welcome to my talk on shape theory in level design, as I'll be discussing how we can best use this shape theory technique to help improve our level design and kind of what shapes can have what kind of impact on the player's psyche. So there's going to be many things that I'll be discussing throughout this talk, and this is kind of what you can expect to take away from this as we progress through this talk. I'll be talking about who I am, breaking down how I've learned about shape theory and how how I apply this to my day-to-day job. How is it that I've come to understand shape theory and what kind of impacts it has on my work. We'll also be discussing definitions of shapes, breaking down which shapes can have what effect on players. What is it that they can do to help highlight your level and also improve certain areas of it, and how subconsciously they talk to us as the viewer or as the player. And then moving on to environments in architecture, how we can use that in architecture, what these can have effect in terms of the gameplay as well, not just the shapes themselves, but using them in a pragmatical way to be able to have an impact within that. And then finally, guiding shapes, as it very much is important and is the role for us to understand how we can use these to help make sure that players do not get lost throughout. So let's talk about who I am and how I've come across these shapes. Well, my name is Max Pez, for those of you who don't know. I've been in the industry for over 5 years now, worked on a range of titles from mobile, indie, AAA. I've had blogs featured on multiple sites, as well as running my own podcast for Level Design called the Level Design Libary. Now, before we go any further though, I do just want to take the time to say that all of this presentation does not reflect or have any resemblance to that of my employers or previous employers. This is just something that I have learned along my way and that I wish to share with you. It is just something that I am studying, and I will not be mentioning this in any projects that I've worked on throughout this as well. So again, this is nothing to do with any previous or current employers, solely my opinions alone. So my role within the game industry though is that of a level designer, and I think it's important to highlight this because shape theory is not just solely to that of level designers. It can be used in many different disciplines as well, but I just want to highlight that we're going to be talking about it from a level design perspective, that we are going to take a deep dive into how we as level designers use it. Like I said, there are other disciplines that use it, and they use it in different ways, but the primary focus of this talk, if the title didn't give it away, is that within level design. So now that we're going to move on to shape definitions, breaking down what shapes have kind of different meanings they have. And before we do that, we need to talk about a study that was done in I believe it was 1929 by Wolfgang. I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name because he's German American and I would only butcher the last name. But this is a really important study because it helps us understand how we perceive shapes, as he would present people with these two shapes here and ask them the question of which word do you think match the shape. Now the words are that of Bubba and Kiki. So take just a couple seconds and think, which of these words match these shapes, Which one do you think is Bubba and which one do you think is Kiki? Because they found out that 98% of people agreed that these words would be associated with these shapes. And that's really interesting because the fact that this helps us understand how we as humans perceive shapes. If we now take a look, sorry about this, I'm a tad ill while recording this, so I do apologise. But what we can do when looking at these shapes here, we can see that they have a different impact, these basic shapes. Like if we look at the circle, for example, it makes us feel very safe, it's cuddly, it's non-threatening, you feel like you could just pick that up at any point, just reach down and grab it, and there wouldn't be any kind of ramifications from it. And then what character design have learned from this is they've actually applied this to their drawings. By no coincidence, is it the fact that Mickey Mouse is essentially 3 circles. But if we do a different comparison compared to that of the triangle, it feels very sharp, it's dangerous, it could be harmful for us if we just reached down and grabbed it because of how pointy it is. And then, again, character artists have taken this and applied it to their more evil characters, whether it be that of the devil, Maleficent in one of the most famous Disney villains as well. They tend to be much more of these sharp, jagged angles, so we instantly know what is their kind of moral ground, if you will. And then finally, for squares, we see them as much more stable, neutral, maybe even useful. If you think of Carl from Disney Pixar Up, he was very much stable in his lifestyle. He did not want to move despite the environment and neighborhood changing around him. He's very stuck within his world and didn't want to progress. And this is all really cool, but as you can see, I've primarily just spoke about character designs. But how can we actually apply this to that of our level design? Well, take a look at this, for example. Here is a room that I was creating for a hub space or safe area. You know, when I was previously working in Division, that's for some of the spaces we had. We had these hub areas where players could go and take time to relax and breathe and make sure they could refill ammo, there wasn't any danger for them. And by having these, because it was a cover-based shooter, by having something like this that would be something that is more round, you'd have the fact that it wasn't as inviting to take cover on, because, to be honest, most of the cover we use in Division would be that of more rectangular or squared shapes. And by having this, we know that there is no need to take cover because it's a safe area. Even those are the tables there. The fact that these tables have no sharp edges, that this can help make this place feel safe. So when you're propping out your blockouts, think about how we can use that. That was just a hypothetical example with the Division, but think about this as well. These kind of spaces which you might not have any combat or action or even puzzles, you can use these kind of shapes to help people feel as if they're in a safe space by using these shapes. In comparison though, we can use triangles in different ways. As you see, this is a very, really a not safe shrine for Link in Breath of the Wild. And as we can see here, all of these kind of sharp spikes that we see around it, making it feel that it's really a dangerous spot and we could be in danger. And a quick side note on this, if you take a look at this specific shot here, what's great is the amount of different shapes they're actually using in here. The platform that Link is stood on is actually very square and rectangular. It's very stable, as we spoke about in the previous, when I was breaking down the shapes. It's stable, it's not going to move. But if we have something that is this cogwheel, because it's circular, we know that it is still safe, but it is now moving. So players have to be aware of this. And then we have these spikes here, which are the triangles, which players know will deal them damage. And it doesn't look like Link has much health to spare in this. But it's amazing how you can, again, use these together in order to make the player understand the different kind of level of impact or movement these shapes will have in this world. Now we move on to square and rectangular shapes. And what's really cool is Tomb Raider and Uncharted use this very much as well, but they use squares as a stable platform, but also a way to encourage movement vertically. If you look at the kind of crypt kind of area on the right, you can see that it actually becomes kind of like a ladder for the player, understanding that they can use this to gain a height vertically by climbing this and then move their way across the pillar and then towards this weight over here as well. And by using these shapes here, the player can understand the movement that they will go on. Even the platform that Lara is climbing upon is a square platform as well. So again, signaling to players that these are stable spaces for the player to use. So within this, there's a few points that we can take away from this. We can take away that different shapes trigger different kind of emotions and how we perceive different spaces from this. So when you're creating these spaces, try and link it to that of which you have in terms of maybe there's a certain emotion that you want the player to feel when going through these spaces. Can these different shapes help to convey these emotions? You know, highlight quickly, when you're doing this, we can highlight quickly to players that they understand what is playable, dangerous, or safe. With that, we discussed a little bit earlier within the shot from Breath of the Wild, by having these different shapes, players instantly understand that there is different kind of, I guess, consequence for using them, if you will, because they move or they stay or they interact differently with the players. Just by different shapes, we can communicate quickly what's going on. And then finally, combining all of these together can give the best effect. Understanding how these all come together so players know quickly what in order they need to do. So now, let's move on to the shape of environments. Now when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about like the architecture around it, talking about things on how we can use and investigate different architecture to help convey either different emotions or push things beyond what people think. This is a common mistake made with level designers starting out, and I also made this mistake when I was starting out, that a lot of the rooms tend to be very boxy, just square, cube rooms, and that's not really the case. There's a lot, even if you just looked within the room that you are currently watching this video in, I'm sure you see there's certain walls or part of the walls extrude or kind of take up and ease into the overall space as well. And it's important you understand that, because these can help impact how we move through the space, as well as try to think about the shapes in here. Can they convey a certain emotion that you want for that space? We were chatting about safe rooms earlier. Maybe something more like this circular building here, to help players not feel threatened that they are in this space that they know that they can just move through and there isn't any danger within it. Because if you think about, I mentioned loops here, when you're having combat encounters, there's these loops for the flanking route, for enemies to be spawned in, for players to find, different kinds of maybe loot room. But to that in the circular room, it's just kind of one, maybe two loops at most, so that way the player doesn't need to worry about getting lost, because they will always come back on themselves. So think about how the architecture can affect that movement within it as well. So think about that when you're kind of looking into building a certain space for the player. Do your research on this architecture. Does it have to be square? Can you make, I don't know, if you're making a building based on real life architecture, can you actually make something that is more than a box? Look into these shapes that are actually used for real life examples. And within this, it doesn't just have to be the structure of the building, it actually be different structures within the building as well to help with the gameplay. If you look at these kind of archways, they can come in different kind of shapes. We have that of, sorry guys, we have that of this more traditional kind of rectangular archway, which is very stable. It doesn't really highlight to players that we are in, the players are in theirs or their allies' bases, or nor are they in some sort of enemy stronghold, and that both the enemies and the player have an equal line of sight from this, because it offers the most, the same kind of range to view things. If the enemy is angled above you, you still have the same chance to shoot them as them shooting you, because the whole space is very even within that. But if we look at something which has this more rounded kind of shape here, you can see that the player has a lot more line of sight is the most for them. It allows the ability and the ease of aiming up compared to that of the previous one, so helping the player feel they're in a safer space, compared to something such as this more triangular one, which kind of restricts the view here, that you can be at a disadvantage, because if you're trying to aim up and then the view kind of narrows at that certain point, then it's harder to view, compared to if an enemy is shooting down upon you, they've got a much bigger window of opportunity. So think about the architecture. Can it highlight or make the player feel that they're powerful or weaker in certain spaces because of this, and make it affect the gameplay? So now we'll move on to environmental storytelling. Because this here though, I know it's a beautiful piece of art and you're blown away by it, I understand, but when I'm going to give an example here, this is a very oversimplified example. So it's more about the point. It will be harder to capture, I think, but I just want to point out this to you all. If you imagine we're in this kind of cavernous kind of space, and then you think about how the character is designed, and we're made up of these triangles as well, then we don't feel out of place in here. It feels very kind of natural for the player because the silhouettes of these either stalagmites or maybe these buildings match that of the player's avatar as well. So we feel as if this is a very homely kind of situation. You know, we don't feel out of place. But now imagine if we are this round character, and I'm recording this just after Christmas, so this is definitely my figure, but you can see how out of place we feel compared to that of these enemies who now we don't fit in. It feels a bit more unnerving because of this. And and because of this, and what's really interesting and cool from this is the fact that we as players, as designers, if communicating correctly with the other disciplines, your environment arts, your concept arts, create just a cool feeling of unnerving just by messing around with shapes, understanding how we can make these all link together. And I think it's fantastic. Now again, as I said, this is a very oversimplified way of doing it, but there is still ways to do this within your games as well. So let's think about what we can take away from the shape of environments. Make sure that you research architecture, that you don't just go in making these kind of box rooms. Understand that certain sort of spaces, you know, that of maybe a shopping mall is very differently built to say something like, trying to think of one, maybe that of a power plant. So understanding the purpose of why they're built like that, and can you push that in a direction to help highlight that with your shapes? Is there a way to help it stand out more with these shapes? Shapes in architecture can also provide different kind of feeling within the gameplay as well. Can you put the player at an advantage or disadvantage with the kind of propping, but also the shapes of your layout, so players feel much more kind of either as if they're, you know, in the advantage or disadvantage because of this. And just before I move on, sorry, I've just jumped too quickly, but think about that in God of War recently. They have these really cool kind of spaces, these kind of fish balls, if you will, to have the combat so players can strafe left to right, as well as have the space to run forward, which is really cool. And then make sure that you communicate with all the amazing people that you have, that you work with on your day-to-day basis, because that way you can all help understand and bring something that maybe simple thing as different kind of shapes in your environment can help tell a different story because of this. And now we're going to move on to that of number 4 with guiding shapes. So this is a really cool photo, and you know, I'm married here, but as we just mentioned at the beginning of the talk, is the fact that we see shapes, and you know, triangles can be very threatening, and circles can feel very like soft, but it's also about how we see these shapes also impacts how we perceive it. Because if you take a look at this marvelous staircase, it actually is a triangle, as if it is the head of an arrow leading us up. But this doesn't feel dangerous. It is a great way to help pull in players into a certain direction. By having these stairs widen out at the bottom, it helps pull people within in order for them to progress through. So shapes can be seen different ways, but think about how we can use these shapes to help nudge or suggest to players where they need to go. And this is a picture taken from a talk by Mr. David Shaver, who is a level designer in Naughty Dog. And if you haven't, do go check out his talk, which is about, I believe it's called like Invisible Intuition in level design. It's a fantastic talk, and he briefly talks about shape theory within levels. And one of the things that he mentions is about by having these kind of ledges, these square ledges which feel stable and strong, they are a way to help highlight these affordances, these options for the player in order to progress, you know, where we want the player to go, which even comes into Naughty Dog here by having these ledges feel much more kind of square. We understand that these can be climbed upon, that we can use them to progress. It also is highlighted with colour as well, but you know, by using these shapes they can highlight what is playable and what is interactable for the player to take advantage of. Now we're talking about landmarks here because this is a great tool to help guide players as well. By having these kind of, you know, these big buildings to help guide us, they also come down to shape as well. If you imagine with this little round player here, that if we use these simple shapes, we wouldn't know where we're going. that these kind of shapes here, they're very similar. We don't know which is more important, which is the one that the designer wants us to go in. But if we then add a contrast of these exotic shapes as well, we understand that this building looks far more appealing. I know it's a beautiful building, you're all blown away, but we can see that by having the contrast of this exotic shape compared to these simple shapes, players already know what's important, what is it that they need to go and interact with in comparison to these simple ones. Because of the contrast, and that helps to highlight. So when you are making landmarks, make sure that these buildings have these more exotic shapes, that it stands out more. Again, do your research on architecture, but these sort of things to help players understand where is it that we would like to lead them. So that's all some cool ones, but I want to talk about now how we have different types of movements through our shapes, because we spoke about danger, but it also impacts how we move as well. It's not just about how we see the environment, but how we are pushed and pulled through the environment that we are within, because it has been taught to us subconsciously for years. If you think about the stuff as we watch our family move through spaces, the environments that we've grown up in, such as houses, apartments, all of this has been taught to us, and it is simple shapes that help move us. And now I learned this about a year ago, and it just blew my mind. If you imagine this was a corridor, have you ever stopped to think why corridors are primarily rectangular? Well, I hadn't either. As I said, I learned this about a year ago, but it's because of the length, and when you stand within one, it's like pushing or pulling you within it, because it's just a long stretch. It is moving you towards a goal. And the fact that there is no really sorry, there is no kind of resting point in it. We can only either move forwards or backwards. Yet it is fantastic. Just something so simple like that, it just pulls us in a completely different direction that we don't know. And there's no spot to rest, so you are only forced to go within one or two directions of it. I think that is fantastic. And let's break this down even further. If you think of the Pantheon in Rome, and if you haven't gone, please do go check it out. It is a fantastic building and an architectural masterpiece for many other reasons than why I'm going to show you, but it's a great, cool, amazing building. But if we break down simply to what the shapes are, it's just that of a rectangle and a circle. But it's how these combine together in order to make such an amazing feeling that we move through. Think about, we've got this corridor, so this now pulls someone within the building, and at the top of the building there is a hole, so you'll see light shining through, and with the fact it's circle as well, it draws us into the center. So now that we're in the center, we can take a look around and see what's going on, get a view of this, and then because we are seeing it, we now move around it. All of that because it is drawing us into the center for us to take a view in, and now we're going to skirt around and then be connected back to that of the corridor, pulling us out. Having these two connect, putting them together, makes us move them in a very different way. And I think that is fantastic. It is super cool to see that. And just think about how different shapes have different impacts on moving. Can it push you to the left or to the right? All of this can help dictate how the player moves throughout your level. So now that we've gone through, I just want to highlight some of some of the points that I think you should, tend to leave away with this talk with. So shapes communicate to us on such a subconscious level how we perceive our characters, environments, they even control our movements. So really think about things that you want to say or communicate with these shapes, because they can have a bigger impact than we're aware of. Shapes are a great way to highlight such things that the player can move towards, is playable, non-playable, affordances or dangerous spots. It highlights quickly so the player has an instant understanding without us having to explain this, because of generations of understanding shapes. Research your architecture. It's not just square rooms. Think about how you can have different shapes in order to have something, that highlights what is it you are wanting to make. So do research and then push that further. And can you push certain shapes within it? And then finally, shapes can help tell environmental stories. What can you use this in, not only just to help players move through, but what can you say and tell and work with your team to help highlight to the player in a subconscious level, that maybe this space is not where they want to go. So thank you all very much for for watching this. I hope you have enjoyed this and feel like you've learned something from this. I just want to announce that this is now something new towards my Patreon, which is going to be called the Level Design Library, where I release talks such as this, where you guys get to see not only just myself, but amazing other designers out there as well, who are going to be breaking down more amazing things. Already we have this talk, as well as, if any of you have been following me on Twitter, you know that I gave a talk on mental mapping. This is a talk on mental mapping and how to help players understand your level to progress through it, as well as a talk from a friend of mine as he talks about colour within level design, and an interview with myself as well. And there'll be more of these talks coming throughout the year. So if you do want to have even more amazing talks by more amazing designers, then please do check out my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Level Design Lobby, and it is the silver tier perk, which will allow you to gain access to the library there. So thank you very much. I hope to see you on that, and I hope you enjoy more of these amazing talks. Thank you very much, guys. See ya.